Okay folks, so today I'm going to make a grape capsumel or capsicumel. Basically it's just a mead or a wine that is made with peppers. In this case I'm using jalapeno peppers that I just pulled out of the freezer. You freeze these first and then thaw them. That'll help break down the cells inside of the pepper to release the flavor and the heat. I'm using 3 peppers per gallon. I'll be making about 2 gallons worth. I'm going to start with about maybe 3 to 4 pounds of honey. This is the honey from my bees. I have a container that I'll be using to hydrate the yeast in. My yeast selection is going to be Lalvin K1V116. Just like my previous videos, it's recommended to hydrate the yeast first. So I'm going to be using water heated up to 95 to 98 degrees. This will hydrate the whole packet. I am also using some adjuncts. In this case, I have some yeast nutrient, 1 teaspoon per gallon. I'll also be adding a little bit of what I have left of a yeast energizer. This is about half a teaspoon per gallon, and this will just help to make sure the yeast ferments all the way through. The juice that I'm using is just a typical store-bought juice. Again, it's important to look on the side of the label to ensure there's no sorbates or metal bisulfates. In this case, it just has filtered water, grape juice concentrate, citric acid, and absorbic acid for vitamin C. So we're good here. For my container, I'm going to use a 1 gallon carboy or a 1 gallon glass jug. I'll be mixing the grape juice and the honey in this vessel, and then I'll be pouring it into my 3-gallon bucket fermenter that has an airlock. And again, everything has been sanitized to prevent any type of contamination. I have a thermometer to measure my temperature. I have my graduated cylinder and a hydrometer so I can take a reading, and that's pretty much all there is to it. So I am going to be using a teapot that'll heat water, so after I empty out the jars of honey, I'll use hot water to kind of rinse out the jar, rinse out the funnel. And I'm using a brew bag, and the brew bag will help keep the seeds and the peppers from floating to the top. It keeps everything submerged, so that'll really help incorporate the flavors. So that's it. That's my method, and that's what I'm doing. So I'll go ahead and put it together. Well, I made a little bit of a mess, you can see. Just some water that I slopped on the table. But I emptied all the containers. I rinsed them out. My honey jars, I rinsed these out with nice hot water to make sure I got every little bit of residual sugar that's in there. Again, these are 48 fluid ounces, which is about 1.5 quarts. So I got this bucket nice and filled to the top. Now I did use a spoon and I kind of skimmed off there's like 3 inches of foam that was on top. I skimmed off the foam. You don't have to, but I just did that because. So now let me go ahead and clear off all of this table. We'll hydrate the yeast and I'll chop up the peppers and get them in the brew bag. Okay, so right now we're right about 1.104. So I'd like to be up around 1.130 if I can. So we got a little bit more sweetness to add. The reason that this number is important is because I really don't want to back sweeten the mead if I can help it. The yeast I'm using has a tolerance of 18%. So when I take these numbers and throw them into the alcohol by volume calculator, I want something right around 1.130 to give me around 19 or 20%. So I'll add more honey. Alright, so that's pretty close to 1.130. So I got my starting gravity where I want it, so now we'll hydrate the yeast. Okay, my water is at 97 degrees Fahrenheit, so now we're in the appropriate range to hydrate the yeast. Again, I like to follow the label directions. Lalvin K1 V1116, it says between 95 and 98, and we're going to do that for 20 minutes, it says, so that'll be the next step. Again, I use a whole pack. One pack is good for 5 gallons. I'm making roughly, I don't know, 2.5, 3 gallons maybe. You'll see I got my bucket pretty full. It's almost to the top, but it's not to the very, very tippy top, so I got plenty enough room. The other reason why to fill it all the way up is when I siphon, I'm going to have some lees on the bottom, so always account for a little bit of loss. Ideally, I want 2 full 1-gallon jugs, so that's why I try to aim for about 3 gallons total. So I'll have plenty extra. Plus for sampling, taste testing, etc. But we got the yeast hydrating. Again, we're going to wait for 20 minutes while this does its thing. We'll set this aside. And while the yeast is hydrating, we'll go ahead and we'll chop up our peppers. Again, these peppers are jalapeno peppers. They're not super hot, but I did put them in the freezer. I froze them. I pulled them out, and now they're thawed. So I'm going to slice them up. I'm going to leave the seeds and all in them, and I'll put it in a brew bag, and then we'll add that inside of the mead. Okay, so I have my peppers. I have a cutting board here, and you'll see I have a, basically this is just a 1-gallon paint strainer bag, and I have the rock that I soaked in sanitizer as a weight, so that way everything will sink to the bottom. Now we'll go ahead and slice up these peppers. I'm not wearing gloves. I know that you should wear gloves, but these are only jalapenos. They're not like they're super hot. Okay, so we got a nice, pretty full amount. Those are 6 peppers, all diced up into smaller pieces. So now we'll go ahead and cinch up the bag. We got our yeast rehydrating here. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've pitched the yeast. So the yeast is added. I also added my yeast nutrient. I went ahead and I added 3 teaspoons just because it's 3 gallons almost of liquid, and I added whatever remaining I had in this little bottle here of yeast energizer. Maybe it might have been a teaspoon, I don't know. I don't think it was that much of it, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to add our jalapenos that we have in this brew bag. I will dump the juice in there as well, but let's go ahead and add the bag first. And then we'll see it sink right to the bottom. Whoop. Done. We're going to take the bowl of the juice. We're going to add that in there as well, just for the flavor. I'll give it a gentle stir. Just a real gentle stir to make sure everything is nicely incorporated. And this yeast, it does like extra oxygen, so I think every day for the first 4 or 5 days, I'm going to open the container, I'm going to stir it up just to make sure it gets enough air, and that'll help make sure it'll get enough O2. And you'll see everything turns purple. But that's it. I'm going to go ahead and put on the lid, and then we'll call it done.